back and let's just salute paints. I forgot to introduce myself again. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get on with this miniature. Had a pretty busy week and having to jump between quite a bit of stuff. Lots of stress actually. So been becoming a little bit forgetful with what I'm doing now and then, which is just need to be cautious about it. Well, okay, so now we're actually going to place get down to the details, so let's just focus on here. Well, first of all, the one thing that I'm not quite happy with is that if you notice the dress on the miniature, the saturation is a little bit gone and it's not too smooth of a move of the colors glazing from moving from one over to another. So, and there's this part which is kind of lost its focus. So right now we're going to do the part where we're going to add a bit of magenta over here to get this orange. Alright, and then we're going to add more water to make sure to get that nice thin orange, and then we're going to go over at this the sleeve. We're going to make sure that we get it all over in one smooth overlay, right? And whatever part that isn't quite befitting, we're just gonna add this yellow over to it, and we're gonna put it on over here slowly. Dab. There we go. You still want to make sure to keep those dark, so we want to be extra careful about how we place these. Zoom in a little bit, and then just go ahead and get it in there a bit smoother. And then we want to make sure to blend this this ink that we created with the darks. Just get this in here, and then we just kind of place this at the bottom, so we have a much more clear difference. Get the paints here, slowly build that in, step by step, towards the bottom, so that we can get something much more smoother than what we had. Okay, and then over to the top here, we want to make sure to get that nice little crease that we have lost. Oh, and before that, we need to determine that pattern which we said we're going to draw on the chests and the collar area, but we haven't quite gone to yet. So we're going to take this magenta. We're going to draw small little triangles really slowly from the top in this way. I'm going to make sure this camera doesn't accidentally hit me, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit and draw it from a distance. So frame this particular part like so. Move on to the next one. Like so. And so what we're doing is we're just drawing these small little triangles on her collar area. Like I said, I couldn't wait at all at the beginning, but this is always the part that I am the happiest coming to in painting the miniature. It's the part that I finally get to do the detailing. And back in painting, when I was learning in school, I was always told that I spent way too much time in the lining phase and the detailing phase, and not so much on the overall. It's kind of like my weakness. So nowadays when I paint, I always make sure that I have properly incorporated the getting the overall atmosphere of the miniature before atmosphere of the painting before I move on to anything else. Because once I get down to this part, like, I'm not doing anything else. And like, I'm just gonna keep what I'm doing and drawing these bits. And this needs a little bit more of the triangle over here, like so. You need to be just careful enough. You need to be too careful. Okay. I'm gonna keep going, and we're gonna outline it. So oops, it's losing focus again. Can make sure it zooms in pretty closely. So we're gonna frame that her boob, I guess. Make sure that we get it in the right space. So I'm gonna put this marker over here so we know where we were. And notice how my paints are thin and not too thick, and that's because I want to make sure to get that atmosphere from underneath. It's weird, huh? Because in real life, it's the atmosphere over the pattern of the clothing. But I'm kind of doing it the other way around. And that's because in digital painting, when I learned to paint, I discovered that you could actually add details over the top in terms of layering, because digital painting really forces you to understand how layers work, because, well, you just have layers to manage in software like Photoshop. And when you kind of understand how the layers work in real time, you can say, oh, okay, I don't need to put the details first, I can put them on later. I need more thicker paint for this. That's a little bit too thin, but we're not going to touch that one. I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, then the next one. And next one. And notice how we've already got the pretty much the overall shape. And we'll make sure that pattern fits in later. We'll fix it up a little bit. But for now, we can just kind of leave it, let it all dry. Having said that, we should probably draw a button over here, but we need to draw out the last remaining patterns on the bottom first. So we just kind of do that over here. It will also help us highlight a little bit more of those okay, the bottom here. So we're literally freehanding, or rather in my case, I'm just drawing or illustrating. I don't really know about what is freehanding. Freehanding? You mean drawing? Okay, so I got that, and I want to make sure I add a little bit more people to notice that center part between the clothing over here, because I do want to make it a little bit more noticeable. So I'll just add drips and dots of skin color, and later on I'll thicken that a little bit more, but for now, because it's thin, I just want that to dry. Okay, now we also want to make sure that we get the shades accordingly, because right now the colors on the clothing is a little bit too exaggerated. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna zoom out here, and we're gonna put aside miniature and focus on our paints. So the way we're gonna do this is we're gonna take this medium, and I'm gonna place this medium, a whole bunch of it, right over here next to between our teal and our yellow. Need more than that. So we're gonna actually mix new kinds of paint. Since like that medium doesn't look smooth, it doesn't matter, because that's the expression that I'm going for in the miniature anyways. I don't like my paints being too smooth, because what's the fun in that? Gonna add more turquoise. Gonna add just more turquoise in here like this. And then what we're gonna do is gonna take the yellow like so, and we're gonna pave it into that turquoise to get this nice little fresh green. And notice how I didn't use the teal on it over yonder. So there's a reason why. It's because essentially teal is a much more, how do I say it, desaturated, muted, not as pure a green, and it comes from a cyan color that's a little bit grayed out. So what I mean by that is basically, so turquoise is closer to cyan than teal, or even this primary cyan, which is like a blue. And so what happens is that I'm taking this yellow, this really strong cadmium yellow. I think it's called primrose. Yeah, cadmium. Yep, yellow primrose. So I'm actually using that and mixing it together with this to kind of create this lush green. And the reason why I'm doing that is because this green is going to be more strong than a green that if we use mixing yellow and blue. So just in case you guys didn't know, you can use turquoise, and turquoise is a much better color to mix in the green. And so I'm putting a cool green over here, and I'm also going to put a bit of a warm by taking some magenta over here and placing it on the opposite side, just to get a little bit more brownish green. Okay, and the reason why I'm doing that is because we're going to actually also take this white over here and then a bit of medium, and we're going to place it on this side. So this will be our bright greens, which is much more transparent, a bit more brownish green, and then we're going to get the green from the blue side and the teal side over yonder. So this will be actually our filter, and I don't really care that the paints are kind of like look like a mess. It really doesn't matter, as long as you manage your paints right. Now, okay, so we're gonna work on the let's work on the medium tones first, because then we can judge things a little bit easier. So we just kind of plop that in, and we kind of make sure we thin our paints a little bit more on our brush, and just pop that in like this. You need a little bit, don't need too much, but it needs to be enough that it's noticeable. So the amount right now that needs to be on the brush is what I need to be mindful of, not really the paint mixture or anything like that, because we want it to be a little bit more smooth. And I wouldn't be too worrying about those patterns not being too smooth right now, because we'll just remedy that later. Just go ahead and do it like this, small patterns. Take a little bit of medium. We're kind of just going through it with this green. Going a bit more with this green. Make sure it doesn't get into the shadows part, where we'll mostly apply this kind of filter, or rather I'm used to calling it a digital, no, not digital, I'm used to calling it a overlay layer. So we just kind of overlay this green over all over the parts where it should be a little bit warmer. Okay, makes it smoother. And then we'll add just a little bit of that warmer hue right here. This part, mix it like this. Okay, on this part, make sure that's smoother. See what happens when all the paint pigments, they just kind of get together. It kind of blends over the stuff that we've already placed underneath, so it becomes more. Let's just focus on row type. Okay, there we go. So it becomes more smoother. All blends that we've already built up underneath. Over here as well. Just kind of put this brown in this way. Continue on. Put it over here, and then we want to make sure to grab our cooler blue, cooler green, and kind of go over it on the other side, like so. So we have a much more smoother transition. Okay, take more of that green. We're gonna go with it really softly, because it can get really bright really quick in the shadows if you're not careful. Over here, under here, and over at the shadows area here. Okay, and then we just want to take the teal and then mix it a little bit more, and we want to thin that down because we don't want it too much. And we're just gonna get the parts where it's like here and draw that out. And see how I'm just kind of evading, or I'm just kind of dodging the shadowy parts. And this is how we're actually going to discern the contrast between the shadows and the lights of it. So if you notice, it's us now coming together. Okay, so same thing with the bottom here. This is actually one of the easier part, I'd say. in me painting, because generally I already have an idea. Everything has already been laid out underneath, like the foundation is all underneath. And the foundation is what requires a lot of the theory and the abstract part and the analysis and trying to discern where the lights and shadows go, how it bounces off of each surface. Whoops. Making sure that this focuses well. My cat is still bugging me. So I'm making sure that I get this cool side, this dark side, like so. I'm being extremely careful about the way I place them, so that it translates well into the can see how it kind of melts in there. Over here as well. Take a little bit more of our paint. Oh, you didn't jump on my lap? There we go. My cat just jumped on my lap. And I don't know where she wants to go, but she jumped on the table again. And then we're just gonna get this part in like so. We're gonna get in between these lines really cautiously and really carefully. In between these parts. And now I'm going to actually really thin down the paint as I get into the darks, because over here we kind of need to get our green. And green is a pretty bright color, so which is why I'm being extremely careful about it. So there we go. So the shade moving over is not too bad, and we're gonna warm up this part a little bit. I'm gonna cool down some of the parts over here. You can see my cat has kind of invaded the other camera. How are you? Yes, I am. Okay, there we go. Oh, careful, the paint's over here. Well, anyways, let's just get back to what we're doing. We're not done here yet. Okay. In between here. Over here. Making sure we get the greens in the darks. And we have mostly filtered it quite together. We'll need to do another layer after that. But for now, let's work on the other side. So this side is the same thing. We'll add most of our green beforehand like this into our darks. So you can see how once we filter over, it blends in pretty easily. You don't really need to add much after that, which is really great. So you're just going a fade there towards the bottom. There we go. And we'll continue on defining that shape. And all we're really doing now is really just defining shapes, not really anything else. And that's why it's so easy and so great. Oh, there's a bit of paint chunk there that's too thick. I'm gonna remove that. Just add this paint on. This must be the matte medium that was a little bit too thick on that place earlier. Oh well, we'll just paint over it. Once the paint dries and we put enough layers, it's not gonna be noticeable anyway. Okay. Down here. Well, to down there, you'll need to make sure that green is a little bit more obvious. So we'll just kind of put the bright green here towards the foot. Down here. we'll make sure that we blend that up to the surface so it gives a good annotation of green. And we're gonna make sure we add that green as well over here so that it's not too foreign down here, so you guys can see what's going on. Okay, like so, and over here, so we notice how there's a much more desaturated change from the top to the bottom, right? So that's actually what's helping our model kind of come together. We also want to add back more of that orange over to the sleeve because this part is a little bit too dark. So just go ahead and mix more of our orange. It's okay to get our yellow wet. There we go, a little bit more thick. There we go. And we want to make sure to be extremely careful at this point because we've already done everything up before. So notice how it's a nice good yellow. Okay, so without actually washing my brush or anything, I'm going to go back to the magenta and then get this much more reddish magenta over here and go over it again, like so. We did this a long time ago, but then when we defined our shadows, we went a little bit overboard, so we're just kind of remedying it a teeny little bit. But we're making sure that we keep the layer thin so that we have the nice little greens and the other shades that we kind of have at the bottom. So I'm right now just kind of like thinning it down, moving it about, so that we can have a much more organic feel of the that orange. And later on, we'll actually go ahead and outline some of these parts as well. Maybe a brown or a dark blue, so that we'll get something more accurate to what we want. So you can see here, I'm so sorry for the camera blurring out, that it's coming together. That tassel is kind of annoying because it's throwing off some of the light. And we want to make sure to go back to our orange, so let's just go back, and we want to get this part of the sleeve. So I'm doing this way because we only want to show it sufficiently where the light can see it anyways, so it makes sense. So we do it this way. Then we go ahead and take out magenta again, go over another layer, but this time with the magenta. Go another layer because this part is more in shadow, so we want to make sure that magenta is obvious and really clear. And notice how the dress here got a little bit of magenta. We're just kind of moving around, kind of draw little shapes with it. No big deal. Alright, so what about the shadows? The shadows right now look really rough. Don't worry about them. We'll just go ahead and get a little bit of black like this. And we actually need to thin that a little bit more, so we'll just go ahead and thin our blacks a little bit more, and then we'll just go ahead and define it like so. Alright, so blur it out a little bit again. So notice how it's just kind of drawn on. And then we're going to go back to our green. Flick it a little bit just to create that shape. Going into that darkness. here as well. Go it softly around because we want to make sure we create the shape more appropriately. Blend it out softly. So notice how we're mostly just blending the lights into the shadows now. Just kind of taking it slow. There we go. Because at this point, the corner of the miniature over here, it does not need to be so bright, so we're not really worried about getting any real definitions. There we go. Bottom here as well. Okay. And then we want to take our brown. We want to just remove a little bit of that blue by moving it upwards like this. And this will create our saturated shadows and it'll help everything all come together. Let's clean this part up a little bit. Remove that one color pigment. It's actually difficult to get the camera to focus with this lighting of the camera. Okay, so one more. We'll get here as well. Okay, there we go. Let me see what else. We should pale out her face at certain points just a little bit. Let me just move the light like this. Her face needs to be just a little bit more pale at certain parts, so we just add this white to this yellow, like how we've been doing. Thin it out. Take a little bit of it. Oops. Go through the nose. Take some skin tone. Blend it in. Make sure that we get the shadow underneath that. The face over here as well. Give her face more roundness. I think occasionally when I paint, the camera actually goes off. I'm not quite sure how to stop that from happening. Not yet anyways. And make sure to peel that face off. Okay. And let's kind of look at what we have done. Actually, we did quite a bit on this miniature. Okay, so you've kind of already filled, we've kind of united the greens on the front of the miniature. The back here, not really. You can see that this comparison, the back is actually quite a mess. What else have we done? We have painted on our pattern there, but we still haven't drawn the full pattern yet. We are planning to add maybe a bit of white or something bright next to it because it's a magenta. So it will probably be a whitish yellow. And then we'll draw those small lines surrounding that. Oh, we definitely need to do more details on this staff before we can go further on. And add more definition to the tassels. Probably make it, I don't know, red, orange. Maybe a bright orange will do. Because we already have these sleeves are a little bit saturated, but they're also kind of pale. So maybe we'll add more saturation over to the tassel, so it pulls her downwards and makes her more weighty. But again, the focus of should be around her face and chest area, so for the miniature anyways. And the right side of a sword, and the scepter is from the middle. Okay, and actually it's really like the lighting on this thing. It's coming together quite well. Okay, so let's take a break again. Remember to learn from others. Like, really, it's always a good thing to appreciate the artworks of others, and especially those who have come before, as you build yourself up, because then you do learn and discover yourself in the way you would make your paintings, and the way you learn all that you need to learn a lot more faster. Okay, so Tulu.